Officially live. So welcome to everybody who's already joined us. It's great to have you with us on this Thursday morning. The time is 2 minutes to 11, so we're going to be starting officially in just over 2 minutes time. And we're very, very excited. My name is Dan, and I'm joined on screen by my colleague Avi. That might be the YouTube stream, which you're hearing. So we're actually streaming through to YouTube. It's 20 seconds delayed, so it was coming through there. I was hearing myself, and that will serve as the recording. So we are, in fact, recording the session. So if you miss it or miss part of it, you'll be glad to know that you can catch up on the recording. Or if you watch the whole thing, but then you want to rewatch and recap and revise, because Excel is a skill that you need to practice. Practice makes permanent. And Laurie was just saying just before we opened the doors that through so much Zoom practice, she feels like Zoom over the last year, Zoom has become part of her. So I think the more we practice, the more these skills become a part of us and become second nature. So it's the same with Excel, and the more that you practice, the better you will get. Welcome to the 16 people who have joined us so far. We had, I think, the final number was about 65 people registered. We are aware that a lot of people will click to join at 11 on the dot. So we've given an extra 1 minute here. And Laurie, you look like you're working from home there. Tracy, I'm not sure where you are. You're in an virtual background there.
So yes, it's the illusion, which I'm loving.
Very slick, very
I'm
professional.
not saying where I am.
Leave it a mystery.
So right, guys, Ellis has joined us. Hi, Ellis. How are you?
Welcome, Ellis. Welcome to everybody. I see there's about 20 people who have joined us so far. Okay. Please let us know in the chat where you are. We'd love to know. Okay, Ellis says many people follow the recording. Guys, you can chat with us in the Zoom chat section. Just a reminder that this is a webinar, so there's also the Q&A feature. So if you have questions along the way in terms of Excel or anything that we've talked about, then please pop them into the Q&A box. You should be familiar with that. It's down at the bottom of your Zoom window. Okay, Amanda is joining from Johannesburg. Who else is in Joburg? Let us know in the chat. I'm in Norwood. I know Avi's in Sandringham. The clock has just struck 0. Okay, Odette is in Joburg. We've got Sybil in Santon. We've got Anat down the road from me here, Highlands North. Robin's in Sydenham. We've got Tamia in Joburg. Welcome to everybody. Okay, Tamlin is joining from Glen Hazel. We've got Elisa Snowman from Joburg as well. Welcome, welcome, welcome. That number is climbing as expected, 28 people. So guys, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to those who are watching the recording as well. And Tracy and Laurie, a huge thank you to you and the whole AuthJet team for the opportunity to once again present a PivotTable Masterclass. We actually did episode 1, I think it was in August last year. So this is the sequel, episode 2, due to popular demand. We are back. And we've got some cool stuff. If you did attend that one in August, maybe this will be a refresher for you, and maybe you'll even learn 1 or 2 new tricks and techniques. We're going to give you as much content as possible. So let's get started. But before we dive into Excel, Tracy, you wanted to give a quick intro and welcome. So over to you.
Thanks, Dan. So I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for joining us this morning. It's so nice to see not only AuthJet businesses, but a new audience that's with us this morning. To Dan and Avi, I'd like to say a huge thank you. The work that they have done for AuthJet and the way their involvement with AuthJet has been absolutely phenomenal and incredible. So spending time with them is always such a pleasure. Last year, they hosted the AuthJet Annual Awards for the first time ever online. And it was an outstanding production is the right word to use. And I wish I could have them on the Zoom platform with us every month. But due to their workload and time constraints, we're just extremely lucky to have any time with them at all. I hope you all benefit from this morning. And thank you so much all for joining us.
Great stuff. Thank you, Tracy. I have just posted into the chat to download the Excel file and cheat sheets. Please click here now. Guys, this is a practical masterclass, as is the case with all of our training. It's really practical. You can sit back and watch, and you can do the work on Excel at a later stage, and that's okay. But first prize is if you actually follow along with us and do the work with us in real time, because that way it will just be as practical and experiential as possible. So please click on that link. I'm going to click on that link, and then I'm going to share my screen just to show you. Okay, it should take you to this page when you click on that link. And when you click on the green button over here, it downloads a zipped folder. So let's see that folder down at the bottom there. When I say show in folder, there's the zipped folder. I'm going to open it up, and you'll see over here that I've got data, PivotTable's masterclass, and then there's our famous keyboard shortcuts cheat sheet. Okay, so we've got our keyboard shortcuts version 1.1 over there, and then the Mac-friendly version over there. So some of you might be Mac users, or some of you might use a Windows computer and a Mac computer. Whatever the case may be, you have access now to both of those cheat sheets. I'll open up the Windows-friendly one. You'll notice that I've actually, yes, Abby.
You want me to open if I'm going to be, or when we get to Excel, I'll open up Excel on my screen.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So for now, I just wanted to show you this keyboard shortcut cheat sheet. Pre-COVID, we used to give this out as a printed, laminated, double-sided cheat sheet. You can do the same. You can print it out in color and on double-sided and laminated. You can stick it up on your pinboard if you have one next to your computer, or you can carry it around with you. It really is valuable. We are big believers. You'll know if you've attended any of our training before that we love to help people to become keyboard people. Most people in our experience are more inclined to use the mouse. Okay, but when it comes to Excel and when it comes to using the computer in general, the more keyboard shortcuts you can use, the more time you'll save. And in fact, the more fun you'll have. So this is your very own keyboard shortcut. Another trick is you'll notice that you can see my entire screen. I'm actually working on 2 screens at the moment. If you have in your office or home office, if you have the luxury of 2 screens, that's great, because you'll be able to watch us on Zoom now on the one screen and use Excel on the other screen. And you might want to open up that cheat sheet on one of the screens. If you only have one screen, or you're watching on your phone or your tablet, that's also 100% fine. Don't stress about it. But as we said, the more practical we can make this, and the more you dive into Excel and get your hands dirty, the better. So when it comes to Zoom, I've actually shared my entire second screen here, and that's why you're seeing everything that appears, not just one application. So that's quite nice. So I'll hand over to Avi in a couple of moments, but I'll show you here that when I open up this particular spreadsheet, then it opens up and you can see there's a bunch of columns and there's quite a few rows of data. I also get this yellow bar at the top. I say enable editing. I also get this Kaspersky antivirus thing. If only we had a COVID antivirus. And you'll see that there are 7 columns and quite a lot of rows. So just before I hand over to Avi to do a screen share from his side, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. How do I do that? I hold the control button and I scroll with the wheel on the mouse. That just makes it a bit bigger and easier for you to see watching on Zoom. And if I want to see how many rows of data there are, I could obviously click on or just press the down arrow key on my keyboard, but that's going to take me a long time. I could grab this bar on the right-hand side and scroll down. You can see I'm already on almost 2,000, and that's going to take me a while as well. The quicker, easier way is once again to tap into the keyboard shortcut. And the very first shortcut on the cheat sheet is in fact Control and one of the arrow keys. You can see here up, down, left, or right, and that helps us to move to the start or end of a data region, which basically means cells that contain data. So here's a bunch of cells that contain data. If I want to move to the bottom, I can teleport there using Control and the down arrow key. And there I see that there are 8,367 rows. If I want to jump to the right, I press Control and right, jump to the left, Control and left. And I can jump to the very bottom of the Excel world. Excel does have an end. When we ask people how many rows are there in Excel, they often say infinity. There are, in fact, if I press Control and the down arrow, 1,048,576 rows in Excel. And if I press Control right, I would get to column XFD. If you do the maths and you work out how many rows and how many columns and you multiply it together, it comes to over 17 billion cells in each spreadsheet. The reason I tell you that is just so that you understand and appreciate that there's huge capacity within Excel, and that's just in sheet number 1. Okay, speaking of sheet 1, I can rename that, and I probably should rename that into data, okay, because sheet 1 is not very descriptive. And how do I get back to the beginning? If I'm going to move 17 billion cells to the left and up, that's going to take me literally probably years. So instead of that, I'm going to jump back to cell A1 by consulting my keyboard shortcut and seeing that it's Control Home. Control and Home. Okay, very nice. Move to cell A1. I can also press Control L when I'm in a PDF document, and that looks a lot smarter and cleaner, getting rid of all the Adobe bells and whistles along the side. Control L, and I can press Escape to get out of that. And Control Home is to jump to cell A1. How am I flicking between these different applications? I'm doing that with Alt and Tab. I could go back to Excel just by clicking here, okay, but I can also switch between the different tabs or different windows or applications by pressing Alt and Tab. And then I'm going to press Control and Home, and it's going to take me back home to cell A1. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to save this as something. I'm actually going to save this in the Dropbox folder that's shared between me and Avi. So I'm going to let it synchronize so that Avi has immediate access to the file that I've worked on. I haven't done too much work. I have increased the zoom, but that hasn't changed the data. And I've changed sheet 1 to data over here. And I'm going to change the name. You can see that this is a read-only file. So if I want to save it, I actually have to save as. And the way to save as is, you might be familiar with going to the File button and clicking on Save As over here. By the way, if your Excel interface and your file menu looks different, if instead of green, it's like beige or gray, it just means that you're on maybe an older version of Excel, which is not a problem at all. The core functionality is the same across different Excel versions. I happen to be using Microsoft 365, so I've got the latest version of Excel, and I pay an annual subscription to Microsoft for that and for updates. You might have an older version of Excel, but as I say, the functionality is largely the same. So I'm going to press, instead of File, Save As, browse around, there is a keyboard shortcut. Let's take you back briefly to the cheat sheet. And if you look here on page 2 of the keyboard shortcut cheat sheet, you'll notice that the very last shortcut on the list is in fact F12, which is Save As. Okay, those of you who might be working on a Mac, some of your shortcuts are different. So in that case, please consult the keyboard shortcuts for Mac to see what the relevant shortcut is. So I'm going to press F12, and that's going to open up the Save As dialog box. And you can see I'm in a temp folder here, which is not very nice. It's not a good practice or good habit to actually work in this app data local temp folder and inside a zipped file. So instead, I've pinned this PivotTable Masterclass 22 April onto my quick access folders on the left-hand side, because I use it. I typically pin folders that I'm using frequently, and I am going to take out the words copy of. I'm going to press Shift Home to select that part of the name, delete it, and I'm going to say Data PivotTables Masterclass. And because I've been working on this, I'm going to save this with my initials DS so that I know that I've worked on it. I click Save, and I'm sure that that will synchronize with Avi on Dropbox in the next few seconds. I can actually see the Dropbox little icon over there. You might use OneDrive or Google Drive or whatever cloud storage and synchronizing software that you've got. We encourage you to use some kind of software to save in the cloud. As we all tragically witnessed over the last few days in Cape Town with the fires, there were a lot of, in the Jagger library, there were a lot of files and records that were not saved or backed up or online. And it really is tragic when things get lost in a fire or in some kind of tragedy. So save things in your in the cloud on whatever drive. And I think Avi is viewing the file. I can actually see there that Avi is viewing it now. And in order to avoid conflicted copies, if Avi makes changes and I make changes, that's why Dropbox is letting me know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen. And Avi is going to open up the file, and Avi is going to share his screen. And Avi's going to guide us through the rest of this masterclass. I'm going to be here supporting, and I might add in or ask a few questions along the way. Once again, a reminder, if you do have questions, please pop them into the Q&A box.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. And just by the way, Dan, a reminder that I know we've got 1 or 2 polls we want to launch now quickly. So we can do that quickly while I'm opening up the spreadsheet and getting ready over here. So I know that we're going to be doing 1 poll for AutoJet at the start, just to remind you of the great work that Aut does. And we would love to appeal to you to donate anything that you're able to. So you can do that now quickly. And then we obviously are going to go straight into Excel. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. And another poll, which we'll do in the next minute or so, is just to ask you as well, when we're done with this donation appeal, if you've ever actually done a crash course with us before. I have a feeling 1 or 2 of you might have done a crash course with us before. It's just good to know if you've done something with us before. That just gives us an extra little bit of a sense of where some of you guys are at.
Okay, we're going to leave the AutoJet poll up for another 5 seconds, guys. So if you do want to make a donation, if your amount that you want to donate is not there, obviously, please click other, and AutoJet will be in touch with you. So let's end that and let us find out. Yeah, have you in fact been on any of our training before? So let's leave this up for about 20 seconds. Okay, I see the majority of you have not, which is great.
All right, cool. So now, guys, you're seeing my screen. We're obviously going to dive straight into this because we now have got some of the logistics out of the way. We're set up. We're ready to go. We've opened up the file. By the way, if you have not yet opened up this Excel file, there's a link in the chat. Please download that zipped folder, open up the Excel file so you can follow along with us. Just one additional disclaimer I want to make is that this is not a total beginner's Excel crash course. So if you've never opened up Excel in your life, you may be a little bit overwhelmed. I'm going to do my best to make sure that I go at a good steady pace and don't overwhelm you. That's just a disclaimer, because pivot tables is not necessarily the skill that you're going to be learning on day 1 of Excel. If you're brand new to Excel, Dan's going to quickly post a link again in the chat if anyone doesn't have it. All right, let's go straight into it. You know, I'm seeing my screen. And we're in Excel. We got the ribbon at the top. We got the name box over here. We got the formula bar, and we've got our data. The first thing we're going to do now, guys, is just have a quick look at the data. We can see, as Dan mentioned, that there are lots of rows. This is a anonymized version of our progress report. So we've jumbled up the first and last names. We've removed emails, and it's just a nice little database that we can use to show you what a pivot table is, how it works, and how to really create an awesome summary of your data. Okay, but before we do that, we're just going to do 1 or 2 quick steps in preparing the data to be converted into a pivot table. Okay, so what are we going to do? Step 1, we're going to stand anywhere in our data, guys. Now, this is important. You have to stand somewhere in the data. Okay, it doesn't matter where you are, as long as you're not there or there or there or there. Can you see the difference? That's outside the data. This is inside the data. You need to make sure, this is crucial. If you want to build a pivot table, you have to have column headings. Okay, so if I went and deleted this, okay, don't try this at home. If your data looks like this, where there's just data, there's no headings, this will not be able to be converted into a pivot table. So what am I going to do? I'm going to press Control Z. It's on the cheat sheet. Control Z will undo that. So I want to undo that. I have to have column headings. Full name, workshop, progress, etc. Okay, now what we're going to do, we're standing in our data. We're going to hold down the Control button. Hold it down. Don't just tap it. Okay, hold it down and then press T. So Control and T at the same time will basically do the following. It will allow you to convert your data into a table. So you can see we didn't have to go and select the data first. Excel automatically picks up that our data starts in cell A1 and it goes all the way down to cell G8367. Okay, so it did all the hard work for us. The tick box is ticked that my table does have headers. So if for some reason yours wasn't ticked, you need to make sure it is ticked, but typically it will definitely be ticked. Then I'm going to press OK. All right. Wow, what has just happened? We're not going to go into too much detail into this. We go into more detail in our Excel 202 workshop in working in table mode. But what you can see is that it was very easy to convert our data into a table. So you guys agree with that? We didn't spend hours formatting it and adding in filter buttons, and it looks really professional. So we recommend working in table mode in general. You don't have to actually do this step before you convert to a pivot table. That's very important to add. Okay, you don't have to be in table mode, which is what our data is now. It's in table mode. It's just like the holder, the vessel of our data. You don't have to do this in order to convert to a pivot table, but it is just a nice, useful step to do anyway. So we kind of just taught you something along the way. So we're in table mode. You can see that when I'm in the table, this is important. We're going to see this again soon when we're in a pivot table. When you're in the table, anywhere, you see this design tab at the top of your screen. If you're outside of the table, you will not see it. It's important. So now that I'm inside the table, see the design tab. You'll notice that there are different styles over here. I like using this style. You can change it if you want. So we're on the design tab. You can change the style over there. You can also, for example, see that banded rows is that alternating color where it's gray, white, etc. I'm going to switch it on because it looks quite nice and it makes it very easy to look at the data. Okay, so that's banded rows. We're not going to go into too much more detail at this stage in working in table mode because the main focus today is obviously pivot table. But we're going to do one final step before we convert this into a pivot table, guys. We want to format our data. So what do I mean? You can see here in the progress column, these should be percentages, but they're not. It's just 111, 0.22. Okay, these need to be formatted as percentages. The last activity column, these need to be formatted as dates. SAST, you may not know what this is. This is a time. You may not very often be working with times in Excel, but we'll show you anyway how to convert this into a time format. And then member since, again, these are dates, but they're not formatted as dates. So we don't know what these numbers actually mean. Okay, so follow along with me now. I'm going to stand anywhere in column C, which is column C, column A, B, C. Anywhere in column C is fine. So I'm going to click here, anywhere inside the column C. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a great shortcut. I have a feeling Dan's going to post it in the chat, and it's also on your cheat sheet. The shortcut to select all the data in column C, the shortcut to select all of the data in column C is Control and Spacebar at the same time. The spacebar, the place that aliens go to drink. Okay, so you can remember that one. Control Spacebar. That will select all of the data in this column, all the way down to the bottom, all the way down to the 8,000 and something row of data in this table. So very nifty, Control Spacebar. Now we're going to press the following shortcut. Again, it's relatively easy to remember because we want to convert into a percentage format. So if you guys look at the top of your keyboard, you'll see the percentage symbol on top of the number 5. So look on the top of your keyboard, on top of the number 5. You're going to then press the following shortcut. Control and Shift and 5. Control and Shift and 5. You also will see this on your keyboard shortcut cheat sheet. So that's why we are big believers in using that and even printing it, because most of these shortcuts that we're mentioning today are on that cheat sheet. Okay, so what did I do? I press Control Spacebar. I then press Control Shift and 5 to convert to a percentage. Now I'm going to go, why am I skipping over column D, you might be wondering? Because this is just a number of times the person has signed in. We don't need to format this. It's just a regular number. That's perfect. Now we're in column E. Last activity, this is a date. Again, we're going to follow through with the same shortcut. Standing anywhere in column E, we're going to say again, Control Spacebar. And then what we're going to do is instead of Control Shift and 5, and now again, this is on the top of your keyboard, not on the right. There are numbers on the right-hand side of your keyboard, but ignore those, they will not work. On the top of your keyboard, you'll see the hash symbol on top of the number 3. So you need to press Control Shift and 3. That will convert to a date format. Okay, moving along to the next column. Going a little bit faster because we're kind of just doing the same thing again. We're going to stand anywhere in column F. We're going to say Control Spacebar to select all of the data. And now, earlier for percentage, we did Control Shift 5. Then we did Control Shift 3 for date. Now we're going to say again on the top of your keyboard, Control Shift and 2 with the @ symbol, Control Shift and 2 with the @ symbol to convert to a time format. Okay, can you see how we're going? We're working very smart. Okay, we don't have to go now and click and drag like this. Can you imagine guys doing this all the way to the bottom? That would take us hours. Instead of doing that, we stand anywhere in column G. We say Control Spacebar again, where aliens go to drink. Then again, we're going to say Control Shift and 3. Again, not 3 on the right-hand side of your keyboard. That will not work. The 3 on the top of your keyboard, Control Shift and 3. Okay, fantastic. So now what have we done? We converted to a table. We made sure that our data has headers. That's crucial and compulsory if you want to convert into a pivot table. Then we've just done some formatting. That's very, very important. Now, before we carry on, it's good practice to just press Control S. That will save our work. Okay, so for whatever reason I drop off or my computer dies, which it shouldn't because I've got an inverter, then it's saved and Dan can pick up and carry on. All right, so now we are finally ready to go into a pivot table. Okay, so let me ask you a quick question. We haven't set up a poll, but let me know in the chat, guys, have you ever used a pivot table before? Has anyone in this session, in this virtual webinar room, ever used a pivot table? If you have, nope. Okay, has anyone got an answer which is yes? It's good to know. Anat has not. Amanda, great. Ellis, great. Robin, great. Now, it's likely that you've used it or you've seen it or someone did it for you and you're not so sure how it works. So what we're going to do now, we're really going to go from the ground up. So now what is a pivot table? Let's start off with that. Okay, a nice way to describe it, the easiest way to describe it really, is that it's a summary of a large data set. Okay, and it's very flexible and it's customizable. Let's think of the word pivot. We've all heard it quite a lot over the last year, where many people have needed to pivot their businesses or even pivot their lives in a way. We have pivoted our lives. So what does that mean? Pivot means to move around a central point. Okay, so there's something in the center and we need to move around. We need to pivot. Okay, so in a way, we've had to change ourselves and our lifestyles and our businesses to suit the different scenario, which is COVID in the middle. So we had to pivot and move around. So what does that mean in terms of Excel? We've got our big database here. Okay, guys, can you guys see? If I select all of this, you'll see, check how many, we've got 58,000 entries of data. Okay, so there's 8,000 rows, but when you times it by the 7 columns, we've got lots of data. So that's our central point. And we're pivoting around it, meaning we're looking at it from different perspectives. We're summarizing it. We're seeing, for example, what's the average progress? We can start looking at dates and summarizing according to dates. We can start to see how many different how many different workshop levels do we have? So we can start seeing insights into the data that we wouldn't automatically see if we're looking at a big database like this. Another way to describe it, guys, is, for example, we use the analogy of a car. Okay. If you have a car, when you think of a car, underneath the bonnet or the hood, if you're not South African, but I'm sure most of you are South African, underneath the bonnet, we've got the engine. And that's where everything's going on. That's really the engine and the motor and where everything, the core components of the car are. Okay, they're under the bonnet. But you don't always need to know what's going on underneath the bonnet. What you need is when you're driving is a little dashboard. Okay, you need a summary of the key performance indicators. Okay, so you need to know, am I running out of petrol? Okay, you're not going to go and open up the bonnet and look inside. You just have a dashboard that tells you how much petrol you have if you need to fill up more. There's a dashboard telling you how fast you're going. There's a dashboard which might be telling you if your car's overheating, etc. So it's a dashboard. So that's, again, another way to describe what is a pivot table. It's really just a dashboard, a summary of our data. So now, without further delay, let's actually go and do it. So how do we do it? Quite simple. We stand anywhere in our data. Again, that's important, guys. If you're standing outside of the data, if you're standing here and you say, Avi, mine's not converting to a pivot table, it's because you're not standing in the data. So go into the data, and then I want you to go up, and it's easy to remember because we're inserting a pivot table. So the second tab on the ribbon, okay, you might think it's the third, but it's actually the second because file is not really a tab, it's the file options. Home is the first tab, which is where we've been for most of today. And then insert, the second tab, there's a button on the far left which says pivot table. Now look, also very cool and useful is the screen tip. Excel is telling me in the screen tip, easily arrange and summarize complex data in a pivot table. Great, it's exactly what I want to do. Okay, FYI, we'll look at the FYI later. So all we're going to do is click on that button. Great. We don't need to change anything in this window. Can you see this window here that I'm moving around, just so you know what I'm referring to? In this create pivot table dialog box, you don't need to change anything. Okay, select a table or range. It's saying table 1 because we converted our data into a table. Okay, you can ignore that. It's also saying choose where you want the pivot table report to be placed in a new worksheet. But we're not going to change anything here. You can even just ignore it for now. You just need to click on OK. Uh-oh, what happened? I lost my data. Call Avi and Dan. Avi and Dan, can you help me? I lost my data. I need to recover my data. Dan, what do we do? Are you there? My data's gone. I don't know what happened. I clicked on the button and now everything's gone.
So the first step in this scenario is to breathe. Deep breath in, deep breath out. Okay, compose ourselves, have a look around. Okay, you've taken your mouse and you've clicked on the data tab. So the data sheet, the data tab, it's still there. Your data is still there. What it's done is it's created a new sheet called sheet 1. Okay, right. And that's where our pivot table is going to sit. So just as I changed sheet 1 to data, Avi's double clicking and he's changing that to pivot or pivot table. And Avi's going to talk to you about that placeholder on the left and the list of columns on the right.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for helping out there. All right, cool, guys. It's very important that you're just comfortable with the Excel environment in general. So as I say, if you are a total beginner, I'm going to make sure that you're comfortable with the fact that you can have different sheets at the bottom. I'm sure most of you know that by now, but just in case you're not aware. So what did Excel do? It inserted a new sheet, and our pivot table is going to be here in its own new sheet. Okay. By the way, an easy way to remember the terminology, I've got a little book here. Okay. My A to Z cheat sheets for PlayStation 1, nice and old school. But the point is, a book is an overall document, and inside a book, you've got many sheets. Okay, can you see you've got sheets? So same thing with Excel. The workbook, if someone says, where's your Excel workbook? That's the overall file. And then inside a book, you have many sheets. Can you see here? These are your sheets, and you can have many, many more sheets. I'm going to add more, and then I'm going to delete them. Okay, so that's also just important to note. Now what I've done is I've renamed the sheet, and now again, Dan said something very important, and this would have been a useful lesson to me a few years ago, because I was, just before I started my job, I was doing a course, and I had to analyze some data. I spoke to a friend of mine who's already working. He said, "Oh, you got to do a pivot table," and he put it in for me, and he sent me this thing, and I was a pivot table, and I don't know what was going on. I was so confused. It looked like rocket science, literally. So what advice I could have really done with at that stage was Dan's advice of just breathe and just relax. Excel is actually designed, you may not believe it, but it really is designed to be quite user-friendly, meaning it's there to guide you, give you tips and guide you through how things work. So if you look on the left-hand side of your screen, let's look closely. What is going on here? It says pivot table 1. To build a report, choose fields from the pivot table field list. Where is the field list? Oh, it's on the right over here. Now I'm going to use some fancy little drawing over here. And just to show you this on the left-hand side, this is your placeholder, meaning that's where your pivot table is going to go when we start building it. Okay, how do we build it? We go to the pivot table field list. Where's that? It's over here. It's the field, and here's the field list. Okay, so what is Excel telling me? Choose fields. How do I choose? You can see here, again, a nice little picture. It's got a little tick in the tick box. Does anything look ticked yet on mine? No. So Excel, can you guys see so far? Excel's actually told me everything I need to know. I didn't actually need Dan or Avi from Excel Academy so far. Okay. So really, in a way, what we're doing when we're teaching is we're just kind of showing you what's already there. Okay, so let me just clear my beautiful drawings. So what am I going to do now is I'm going to just follow exactly what Excel told me to do. I'm going to just select one of these fields. So let's just select the first one. I'm going to select full name. Okay. Now what has happened? Let's look closely. It's now we've got actual data in where our pivot table placeholder was before. And what it's done is it's inserted all of the full names. So it basically takes, if you think about this, the field name, let me just adjust the column headings here. So what am I going to do? If you want to auto fit your column widths, meaning you can see I just can't see the names nicely. I'm going to use my mouse. I'm going to select everything, that little triangle here in between column heading A and row heading 1. I'm going to select on that, and I'm going to double click in between A and B, or even B and C, or C and D, or anything to work. So I'm going to go in between F and G. You see that little line? The mouse looks like that. I'm going to double click. Okay, so now what are the field list names? What are these? Where did these things come from, guys? Can you see here? The fields, the pivot table fields list, the list, these items, which are called fields now, fields is another word for column headings. That's why earlier I said, guys, you have to have column headings. So look here, full name. So what did it do? It took full name and it put full name into the rows area over here. Can you see at the bottom, guys? There are these 4 areas. Again, I'm going to use a nice little drawing to make sure you know what I'm talking about. Okay, there is filters. We're going to talk about that. There's columns, there's rows, which we are currently using, and there's values. So what has Excel done? Okay, it inserted full name into the rows area at the bottom. Okay, but what does it do when it actually puts a field into a row area, like you can see it's doing now? Can you see what it did, guys? Just gave me all of the unique names in that list. Now, let me ask you a very important question. Very, very important. Based on what I've explained to you guys so far, guys, based on what I've explained, Sybil, I'll look at your comment about count of full name, because what yours did this. Okay, yours went into the values area, Sybil. So I'm going to show you now how we can actually move things around. Okay, you can try that already. You can move them around. You can move it from columns into values, into rows, into filter. So for now, we want full name in rows. But what's so important, now think about this, guys, really think deeply about this or properly. What do I mean? Earlier, I explained to us all saying a pivot table is like a dashboard. It should be a summary of the data. Is this, yes or no? Answer me now in the chat, please. Is this a summary of the data when we've now still got, if I jump to the bottom, we've still got 8,000 rows? Is this a nice summary? Amanda, Alyssa, correct, guys. This is not a great summary of the data because it's just, in a way, it's giving me exactly what I've already got here. Okay, let me remove my drawings. So this is important just to get a feel for how it works, and that there's no exact right or wrong way to build a pivot table. You have to play around a little bit. Exactly, Michelle, not yet. We're getting there. So now that we can see full name at this stage is not really the field that we want to use, because you can see we've got a few others, and you don't have to use all. You have to play around. So what am I going to do is I'm going to click and drag full name and just put it back in the top. Or I could just, the way I remember, guys, I ticked it. Remember that I ticked it. I could also untick it to take it out. Okay, can you see that? Now, what happens if you say, Avi, my field list on the right here is gone? Guys, it's gone. I've lost it. Sorry, I can't do my work. Tell my boss I'm going on leave. Can't do my work anymore. Excel's broken. Okay, what has just happened is a similar theme that I mentioned earlier. If you want to work and you want to see this table design tab, remember I said if you want to see the design tab, you have to be in the table. Same thing with a pivot table. If you want to see all the options and settings that you want that relate to pivot table, you have to actually be inside the pivot table like that. You can see I'm in the placeholder and now it comes back. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, guys, instead of clicking on full name and try this with me, I'm going to click on workshop. Now, I think you will be answering my question a little bit differently. Is this now looking more like a summary of the data? What I've done now, we put workshop into the rows area at the bottom. You guys tell me, is this now looking more like a summary rather than just a whole jumble of names like we had earlier? Great. So you can see we have to play around. You actually have to see, guys, when you're going to start doing pivot tables with your data, you have to play around. You have to see which fields work in which of the 4 areas at the bottom. And again, to just remind you, you don't have to use all of the fields. I've got 7, and you don't have to use all of the 4 areas at the bottom. It is a flexible tool, and you have to play around with it, and you have to pivot, and you have to see, what if I look at it from this perspective and that perspective, and you need to really flex this tool. Okay, so you go and you look at it from different perspectives. So now, what have we done? Again, if I click outside of the pivot table, that pivot table field list on the right goes away. So again, I need to click inside the pivot table to see the options here. And by the way, when I'm in the pivot table, the options at the top as well, the Analyze tab and the Design tab. You're going to need these. Again, if I'm not in the pivot table, the Analyze and the Design tab go away. So I'm going to click inside the pivot table. And before we carry on, something quite useful that I want to show you, which you might find beneficial. When you're building a pivot table, very often you might want to present it. You might want to show it to someone. Okay. So what I typically like to do, and it's a habit that I do in general in Excel these days. Can you see on the right-hand side that there are all these grid lines? Can you see these? That's a grid line. That's a grid line. Can you see what I'm talking about? So what some people do is they'll select all of them and they'll go over here and they'll paint them as white. Okay, don't do that. It's a bad idea. It's wasting space in Excel. What you'd rather want to do, and we'll do it in both sheets, go up to the View tab on the ribbon, and not Review minus RE, so it's just View, and you untick the Grid Lines button. You see Grid Lines, View tab, Grid Lines. Now, to me, it just looks a little bit cleaner, a little bit more slick, especially when you're building a pivot table. By the way, I'm going to zoom in a little bit. By the way, what happened there? You might say, Avi, my pivot table's gone. All that happened is that I've moved away from cell A1. You could use the shortcut Dan told us earlier. Okay, if I move here and I think my pivot table's gone, I just press Control and Home. Control Home takes me home. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm in my pivot table sheet and I'm going to click on the View tab. Just muted myself there while I sneezed. Okay, sorry about that. What have I done? I'm in the pivot table sheet. I'm going to go up to the View tab. I'm going to untick Grid Lines. Okay, it just looks a little bit nicer in my opinion, my experience. You don't have to, but it looks a little bit neater and a little bit cleaner. Thank you, Laura, for blessing me. I appreciate it. All right, so now what are we going to do? Again, before we carry on, I want you to give yourselves a pat on the back if this is your first pivot table, because this already is a pivot table. It's not going to win any awards and it's not going to revolutionize the way we understand our business, but this is in fact a pivot table. If we end here, you can still tell someone that you learned how to build a pivot table, but there's definitely some more complexity we want to add to this. Okay, so what do we want to do? And by the way, let me actually just emphasize here. What have we done that's so useful? When we were in our big database, we didn't automatically know how many workshops there were, how many unique workshops. And you see, if I just scroll down, yeah, I might eventually figure it out, but we don't have to leave things to chance or figuring out. In Excel will tell us for a fact that there are 4 unique items in this long column of 8,367 data entries. There are only 4 unique items, which is Excel 101, Excel 202, Excel 303, and Outlook Secrets. Those are the 4 main workshops that we offer. So we already know something about the data that we couldn't automatically and obviously see by looking at the database. So again, this is really emphasizing you just conceptually how powerful a pivot table is, that it can automatically summarize and show you things that you don't automatically see in your data. All right, now we're going to carry on and we're going to look for something a little bit deeper. So what are we going to do? We want to know what is the average progress for these workshops? Because if I go back to my data, you'll see that there's a whole lot of progress over here. This person, Amir, is on 100% for 101, but we've got lots of other people who are not on 100%. Amina is on 22%. They're still working. Okay, so what does that mean? We want to try to get an idea, what's the average progress? Okay, now there are functions in Excel. Some of you might have heard of the average function. Okay, average. Okay, many of you, I'm sure most of you have heard of the sum function. So there's a function here called average. Yeah, you could start averaging it out, but that's quite laborious and it's time consuming. A pivot table is really a great way to start averaging things out. So what are we going to do? We're going to take progress. Now, let me ask you this before I do it. Nothing for free here, although it is a free crash course. Where should I put the progress word? Any guesses? Where should I put it out of the 4 areas at the bottom? Not just going to tell you for free. I want you to give me an idea. Where should I put progress? Tamlin, great. I want to put it into the values because you will agree a progress is a number, which is a value, similar type of thing. So I'm going to click and drag. I'm going to show you another way now. Instead of just clicking on it, I'm going to click and drag progress into the values area at the bottom. Okay, so what did it do? Let's stop and have a look. Progress is now ticked, means that it's now being used in one of the 4 areas at the bottom. You'll see, though, that what it does is it automatically picks a type of calculation. How should I calculate and summarize these percentages? So I took all of the percentages, it summed up all the 101s, summed up all the 202s, summed up the 303s, and summed up the Outlook Secrets, and then gave me a grand total as well. Now, let me ask you a question. Does it make sense to add up percentages? Okay, Tamlin, does it make sense to add up percentages? Definitely not. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't mean anything. What you'd rather want to do, and I gave you a hint earlier, I said we want to rather look at an average. We want to see an average over all the work or per workshop, per 101, per 202, per 303, and as per Outlook secrets, what is the average progress? So how do we do that? There's a few ways. There's two main ways to do it. Way number one, much easier than the second way, is you double click on sum of progress here. Can you see sum of progress? Let me zoom in a little bit more. Zoom in a little bit more. If I double click on sum of progress, it takes me to the value field settings window. Can you see this here? Okay, what I could do, another way, is over here where it says sum of progress, I click on that drop-down list, then I click on value field settings at the bottom. Okay, so two ways to do it. The easier way is to just double click on sum of progress. So what do we rather want to do? If you look closely over here, you'll see that there's a tab at the top here which says summarize values by. At the moment it says sum. Earlier, someone unintentionally used a count when I think their full names went into the values. Okay, we don't want to count, we want an average. We want to average out all of the percentages. That makes a lot more sense. So we're going to click on OK. And now it's looking a bit better. But as someone said, let me remind myself who said it. Tamlin said, yeah, we need to change the format. So if you guys remember earlier, when we were just starting off with our data, our percentages looked like this. Can you see decimal points? All we needed to do was format it. So we pressed Control Spacebar earlier. We then said Control Shift and 5 to convert to a percentage format. So similarly, in my pivot table, I need to just format these. Okay. You can format it inside the pivot table, meaning you can double click on average. You can go to number format and you can click on percentage, click on OK, then OK, that will work. But this actually also does work quite well. I didn't always think that it did, but it actually does. And I'll show you what I mean now. I'm going to select all 5 of these with my mouse. I'm then going to say Control Shift and 5 to convert it to a percentage. But now we can see an average progress of each workshop summarized as a percentage, average percentage. So we now can get an idea that Excel 101 is our most successful overall workshop. Okay. We also are proud, though, overall, that when we first launched our online workshops, the average progress was closer to 10%. But over the years, we developed a system and a structure, support, deadlines, etc., a whole framework. So the point is, through building a pivot table, we can see that our system is working, that progress has gone from averaging around about 10% up to averaging at 84%, the massive difference. Okay, now let's spend a little bit of time making it look a little bit prettier. What do I mean? Earlier, when we were in our table, I showed you that when you're in the table, if you go up to the design tab, there are table styles over here to play around and change the style of your table. Similarly, when you're in a pivot table, not when you're outside a pivot table, when you're inside the pivot table, if you go up to the design tab, you've also got some styles. So you click on this. I'm going to go to the one that I like, which is typically this one. Okay, brown pivot style dark 3. Looks a little bit nicer. I then also like to add in banded rows. This makes it a little bit easier to look at. You can play around and find a particular style that you like. You can choose that. It's up to you. So you can play around with this and you can just see which style you like. Some of them I find a little bit too busy. Okay, so I'm going to stick with, let's try this one, try something a little bit different. What's also worthwhile to do, guys, is that in cell A3 here, can you see it says row labels? Now, that's not the most descriptive heading. So what we rather want to do is just change that to workshops. Okay, average of progress is descriptive and it's perfect. But the row headings just says, what did it say? I forgot. It says row labels. We want to change it to workshop. Okay, a lot better. Now, let me show you and teach you something again, crucial and very fundamental to working in pivot tables. I want to go back to my data. And what I'm going to show you is something quite useful that just relates to working in Excel, and it's going to help us learn something fundamental to working in pivot tables. What am I going to do? Look here. You can follow along with me. We're going to go up to cell H1. This is really where all the headings are in row 1. Okay, this is row 1. I'm going to go to cell H1 and I'm going to type in city. And then look what happens when I press enter. Magic. It automatically expands the table. Okay, so I don't have to go and manually update the formatting. What would you use filters? Okay, Debbie, we're going to get there in a minute. So for now, we are in the data sheet. Okay, we're just going to look at inserting a city. So we're going to add some more data to our data. I'm going to add some more data into our table. So I've typed in the word city. I've now got a brand new column. And what am I going to do? I'm going to type in Joburg, Cape Town, and Durban. Just going to type in 3. Now I'm not going to go and type it out until I get to the bottom. It's going to take me a few hours. So I've just typed in 3 cities. I'm going to select these 3 cities like that. Can you see with my mouse? Select them. I'm going to go to the bottom right-hand corner. This is one of the first things we teach you in Excel 101 is how to create a list. What am I going to do? Can you guys see there's a tiny little black plus sign which comes up here? I'm going to double click. So what it does is it just creates a whole lot of cities, obviously random, and it doesn't really, it's not real. It's just, we're just faking up some cities over here. So you can see we've got Joburg, Cape Town, Durban, Joburg, Cape Town, Durban. It just repeats the pattern. Can you see that? Okay, so now we've faked and we just made in some fictitious data to show you something so crucial. Let me ask you this, and you can guess or you might already know the answer. Is this city column with Joburg, Cape Town, Durban, Joburg, Cape Town, Durban, is this new column automatically going to pull through into our pivot table? Do you have any idea? Yes or no? What would you say? What would you guess? Laura, no. Anyone else? Any other guesses? Robin, no. Correct, guys. Robin and Laura, you are correct. It will not automatically update into our pivot table. And how would we know that? We're going to go to our pivot table. We're going to see here in the field list, adjust the size here slightly. In the field list, after member since, there's no city. Can you see that? That's important, guys. When you make changes to your source data, this is where your pivot table is linked to, your pivot table will not automatically update. Okay. And by the way, if you're not in table mode, it will be even more difficult. This is another, what I'm about to show you is another benefit to working in table mode. So when you're in table mode, all you have to do is click in your pivot table, go up to the Analyze tab, and then click on Refresh. By the way, is there a shortcut? Yes. If we hover over the Refresh button, it says Alt F5. So for now, I'm just going to click on the Refresh button, and now can you see what happened? The word city came up. Okay, if you weren't in table mode, what you'd actually have to do, if your data expands, if you weren't in table mode, you'd have to go to Analyze, change data source, and make it a little bit wider to include the new column. That's another benefit of being in table mode. And I'm sure you will agree, it was very easy at the start of this session to convert into a table mode. Now, an important question. Now that we've added in a new field, we had a question coming through about what is the purpose and value? What do you use filters and columns for? So I'll show you quite quickly what filters and columns are there for. Okay, we're first going to start off with columns. Now let's see if we just tick on the word city. Let's just tick on city. Let's see where it puts it. Now what it did, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. What it does, and it's useful to note, you sometimes might want this. It's put in city underneath workshops. So now that's useful to note, guys. You can have more than one field within an area at the bottom. Okay, so you can have more than one field in an area at the bottom. Great. So you might want that where you can see Excel 101 and then underneath broken down into city. So breakdown across city per workshop. But what may be more useful and a little bit easier to look at, and it answers the question earlier that Debbie was asking, what we rather want to do is take city here. We can click and drag city. You see what I'm doing? You got to use your mouse. You click and drag city into the columns area. And now, do you agree that that's actually a little bit easier to look at? You agree? We can change column labels over here with the city like we did earlier. Okay, we can adjust the column width. How did I do that? You can just adjust it like that. Okay. And now what we've got is something that's a little bit easier to look at. So we can see these are your rows, your row headings. So 101, 202, 303, and Outlook. And then the column headings, Cape Town, Durban, Joburg. We have a grand total for both. Grand total at the end here for the columns and a grand total for the rows. And now you can see that we're starting to kind of create something that's more useful and insightful. So for example, we can see that the best city for the best workshop is 86% over here, and actually Durban as well. Okay, so 86 and 86, although Outlook Secrets 91. Okay. You can already see then that adding in the city into the columns area, which I'll show you. If I didn't just click on it earlier, I can click and drag it there and it brings it in. One or two final things I want to show you before we start wrapping up. What if I want to see, let me actually go back here. When we were inserting our pivot table and we hovered over the button, if you look at the FYI says you can double click a value. Now, this is talking about when you've already built your pivot table. When you've built your pivot table, you can double click a value to see which detailed values make up the summarized total. So what does that mean? Let's say we're now having a meeting, me and Dan, and we're discussing the business, and we want to see why is Outlook Secrets in Cape Town only at 79%. We want to investigate. We want to see what makes up that 79%. So you agree it's quite tricky. We could go to our data and we could say, we could say Outlook. We could say Cape Town. So you can see we can do it that way, and we can filter. But then we don't have a copy just of this data if we want to maybe send it out to one of our salespeople and say, can you go and investigate, whatever it might be. So you can do it that way. You can use these filter buttons. But what's even better, check how cool this is. If you double click on that 79, as Excel told us to do, look what it did. Inserted a new sheet at the bottom, which we can now call Outlook Secrets Cape Town. It auto fit the column widths like we did earlier. And now what we can do is we can see the data. Let me double click again to auto fit. We can now see the data that just relates to Outlook Secrets, it just relates to Cape Town, and it's in its own new sheet. So I can go and I can start just kind of seeing and drilling in. So what we can then maybe do is we can sort it from smallest to largest. We can obviously format it like I did earlier. I'm going a bit quicker. But then what we can do is we can say, cool, get some of one of our call center agents, which we don't actually have, but if we did, we'd say, guys, can you actually call all of these people? They're all below 50%. Please call these people and just ask them, how we can help. How can we make sure that you succeed in getting up to 100%? Okay, so you can see a pivot table is a very, very useful business tool that allows you to make sense of your data and look for insights and actionable insights in your business. Okay, the final thing I just want to show you very briefly is what does an overall filter look like? Okay, we had a question around that. Let me just clear all of my drawings over here. And by the way, a good solution in Excel when you've got a question. So Debbie, when you have a question in Excel, you can ask me or Dan as the so-called experts, okay? We know a lot. We don't know everything. We do know quite a lot though. You can ask us, but you can also go and play around and you can say, cool, instead of asking Dan or Avi, you can actually also just go and look, what if I just take city and I move it into filters? What does that do? Okay, it looks a bit different. My pivot table looks similar to what it looked like earlier. And now I'm going to click on, you can see this wasn't there. This wasn't there earlier. So this is my filter. You can see there's a filter button. It's now showing me an overall filter to the pivot table, meaning I've got all currently selected. So if I just want to see Cape Town, I double click on Cape Town. I'll click on Cape Town. I say, okay. And now Cape Town is selected there and it's only showing me Cape Town in the pivot table. Does that make sense? So it's now only showing me Cape Town. What if I want to select more than one? Then I've got to select the option at the bottom, which says select multiple items. So I want to see Cape Town and Durban, then click on OK. Now it says multiple items there. And it's showing me the average progress for multiple items, which is Cape Town and Durban. Okay, guys, I think we're going to leave it at that. I hope you've enjoyed. I hope you've found this valuable. I hope you've had fun. How would we know if you've had fun? Well, there's a poll that has just come up. Are you having fun? Yes, this is awesome. Great. Thank you for the fantastic feedback. By the way, guys, you are going to have access to the recording of this. So if you felt a little bit overwhelmed, that's fine. And by the way, that's often good. It's a good sign if you're feeling overwhelmed. It means you're getting out of your comfort zone. So we want you to watch the recording and practice and go over it so that you can really internalize the skills and the knowledge that we've taught you. So please make access and make use of the recording, which we will send out to you. By the way, Dan is going to tell us briefly about what he's just posted into the chat.
Great stuff, Avi. Thank you. As always, huge energy, huge passion, huge amount of content there. So thank you. I've posted the link into the chat. You might notice that it's actually the exact same link that I posted earlier. And you didn't see any recording earlier, but I've updated the page. So when I share my screen, you'll see here that it's now got the same green button to download the Excel file and the cheat sheets. It's also got a black button, which will take you to the recording of the masterclass. If I click there, it actually opens up the YouTube. It's busy live streaming at the moment. And that same link will serve as the recording, which is quite nice. There I can see me and Avi on screen. And the red button is to actually view our courses, and you can use this special code XL April 2021 to save 75%. If I click on that, you're probably familiar with the names of the courses because it was in the data, XL 101, 202, 303, and Outlook Secrets. There is a 60% code over here for the general public, but because you've been on this AutoJet Masterclass today with us, you qualify for an additional 15% off. You'll see the dollars, the prices are in dollars. So because you guys and most of our clients are actually in South Africa, and the Rand, well, the Rand is actually rallying. It's getting close to 14 Rand to the dollar, but it's still quite expensive in dollars. And also because of lockdown, we've decided just to give an extra discount so you can save 75% off. All you need to do, if you want to buy, for example, XL Unilight, which is 101 and 202, you click buy now and save, and you punch in that code XL April 2021. I'll show you how that works. There's space here for a coupon code, XL April 2021. It's not case sensitive, and you should see that that cuts off 75% off. There we go. And you'll be in for $125, which is around probably 1,800 Rand. And that gets you lifetime access to XL 101 and 202 as an example. Okay, if you do want more info on our actual workshops, what's covered and how does it all work, you'll see that we've put in a handy little video over here. This was pre-COVID when we actually had an office. And I explained XL 101, 202, and 303 and the delivery method. So that should answer a number of your questions as well. And I think that is all on that side of things. But what we actually want to do, Avi, yeah.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Just to give you context as well to the dollars, you may be wondering, why is it in dollars? It's just the way our online site is set up, and it actually works out with a discount, guys, a lot cheaper than our South African rates. Okay, so typically for corporates in South Africa, 2 levels, you'd be looking more at 4,000 Rand ex VAT. Okay, so we're giving it to you at less than half of that, and all you need is any South African card or credit card, and you check out on our website. So I thought I'd just give some context to the dollars.
Fantastic. Thank you, Avi. So guys, just before we end off, we are going to launch the same donation appeal poll for AutoJet. Please, if you are able to, we and AutoJet obviously would really appreciate any support. If you have donated in the first poll, then you don't need to click it again here. We'll have your details and the AutoJet team will be in touch with you. If you are feeling generous and you're feeling in a position to donate, then please donate in the next 10 seconds. And then don't go anywhere, because we've got one last thing to ask you, and I see that the clock has just struck 12 o'clock. So if you're happy to stick around for another minute or two, we'd really appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to take down that poll, and we would love to hear from you what you actually thought of this particular masterclass. Okay, so you'll see there are a number of questions there, but they're very, very quick and easy. For example, question number 1, I can use this webinar information immediately or not at all. Okay, would you like to learn more about this topic? Yes or no? Okay, so please answer those. Okay, thank you for your responses. I see that coming through. Excellent, excellent. And we actually have one more question to ask you after this. You can see these are very, very quick and easy to complete. I see about 10 of you have submitted your responses there. So thank you very, very much. Really means a lot to us to get feedback like this. Okay, I'm going to leave this up for another 10 seconds, just till a minute. And then we've got one last thing to ask you. Okay, fantastic. You might be in a position where you'd like us to talk to you about our workshops, and you'd like to explore, you'd like to have a conversation, you'd like to give it some thought, and that's okay. That's perfectly fine. You also might be in a position where you work for a business or company, and you've got colleagues, or you've got a boss or a manager, and you'd like to explore whether your employer can sponsor you through your Excel courses with us. And that's perfectly okay. And in that case, it really is a good idea to have a conversation. So I'm just going to launch this. If you would like us to contact you in the coming days or week about further training for you and or your team, then just let us know. And then at least we'll know. We'll be able to give you an email or a call. Okay, Michelle, you said you stumbled upon this webinar on Facebook. Where did you advertise? So a big thank you to AutoJet for spreading the word. AutoJet publicized it through their social media and through their email channel. Okay, again, I'm going to leave this up for another about 10 seconds. And yeah, massive thank you to each of you for showing up, for sticking around, for giving it your all. We really appreciate it. It wouldn't be possible without you. So a big thank you. And maybe we'll do another one of these soon. I know it actually was about 8 months since the previous one in August. So maybe we won't wait another 8 months till the next one. And we'll talk to the AutoJet team and set something up soon. Because it does seem like you guys have got a lot of value and enjoyed it thoroughly. So that's great. So big thank you to Tracy and Laurie, who you can see on screen. Any closing thoughts or words from you guys? Were you busy programming your pivot tables as well in the background?
So Dan, Avi, thank you for an absolutely exceptional crash course on pivot tables. I've learned so much, and I'm certainly going to use the resources that you've sent to us. I will be sending out communication to everyone online shortly after this webinar with all the resources included. And we are certainly not going to wait another 8 months. We look forward to working with you both really soon. And unfortunately, as a panelist, I couldn't vote, but I did send Avi a message and I said, yes, please sign me up. So we look forward to seeing you all again soon. And Dan and Avi, absolutely incredible. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tracy. Thanks, Laurie. Avi, thank you.
Thank you both so much.
I see that Sean has just posted about Google Sheets there. So we'll definitely be in touch. We actually have developed some content. We recently ran a webinar for a client on Google Sheets. And it was really valuable because it's nice to have that ability in Excel, but also in Google Sheets. So Tracy and Laurie, maybe that's something we can also talk about for next time. So guys, take care, stay safe, and we'll be in touch very soon.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Avi. Bye-bye.
Bye.